Have you ever felt like you like to step out of the noise of the world? Hi, I'm Tamás and I would love to show you my secret place. One morning I've had a walk in the forest. The frozen grass and the mystical fog sparked my imagination. I knew I need to come back soon. The next day the sky cleared up and I felt special excitement. There is a magical uplifting feeling when you feel the cold fresh air and also the warming touch of the sunrise. As the river was flooding, the water crept between the trees where I had walked before, now showing me something new. It created shapes and forms in the morning light I've never seen before. This is one of the unique moments what I'm eager to capture. Over the past few years, I'm really happy that I was able to travel across Europe and visit beautiful places. But lately I found interesting subjects where I didn't expect before. For instance, this spot is right next to the city center. As you can see in the background, the morning traffic is quite close, although you can escape here from civilization and connect with the untouched nature. Because of the rising water levels, the ground was too wet for me to park close to the forest, so I only carried essential items. I absolutely love this compact easel setup, which is based on camera tripod. The biggest advantage is the ability to fine-tune the height of the legs on uneven ground. This makes leveling much easier than with a traditional easel. I will talk about the portable stand later in the video. Because of the improvised session, I just packed the paint tubes and I thought it would be a good idea to set up my palette on location. In the studio, I prefer to use a larger glass palette, but these aluminum boxes seems really practical for storing the paint. It closes almost airtight, so the paint keeps fresh for more days. As you can see, I've started to set up my palette with a large amount of titanium white. From there, I'm dividing the area into warm and cool colors, and starting with the most used ones, from the brightest cadmium yellow, orange, red and brown. On the right side, continuing with the darkest color ultramarine blue, and lastly, smaller portions of extra mixing colors, turquoise, magenta and green. I'm experimenting with impressionistic wide spectrum palette, which allows me to create more vibrant colors and mixes. The panel is prepared only with gesso, providing a white surface. I usually prefer to work on a warm underpainting, so I don't mind making broader strokes in the beginning to have a larger coverage. During my previous walks here, I've already spent some time studying the major forms of the landscape, so when I chose this spot, I knew what I wanted to include in the painting. I don't really prefer sketching with a pencil when painting outdoors, as it feels a bit too tight for me. Using a thinner medium to dilute the oil paint allows me to sketch the rough outlines and larger shapes of the scene lightly. Sketching with orange-red helps mimic the sunlight filtering through the branches, trees and bushes. I like to have a plan about the layering, which is especially helpful with oil paint. In this case, I wanted to start with the biggest light effect and carve out smaller details from that later. The main idea behind this painting was difference or opposites, the vibrant color contrast achieved by the glowing morning sun against the cooler blue sky. The strong sunlight in front of me distorted my color perception, causing the sky to appear almost full white when looking towards the sun. One thing I have learned from my plein air trips is that we have the freedom to change things up. Nothing is set in stone. There are no rules. Now it was time for some contrast. For my darkest darks, I prefer to mix ultramarine blue with red or brown rather than using a black pigment. When you look around, you rarely see pure black shades in nature. This way I can give the shadows a rich, saturated effect and play with the temperature, how cool or warm I like them to appear. Now, as I'm looking at this scene, I feel like I almost painted fire. Honestly, being out there, watching the sunrise heat up the frozen forest and its glow dance on the water's surface was truly remarkable. While I could feel the cold behind me, I also felt its warm, life-giving energy on my face. Indeed, it's not far from reality. This is something that a camera can't truly capture, but we can attempt to capture the experience through painting on location. It's a sensation that needs to be witnessed or felt in person. I prefer to have a solid surface to work on, so lately I was trying this laptop or projector mount, which acts like a flexible table basically to rest my tools on. It is really handy, easy to clean and surprisingly strong. The only downside is that it requires its own tripod, so I will experiment with other options that are easier to carry for summer hikes. I'm always improving this setup for simplicity and efficiency, so if you have any tips, I would love to hear them. And we are coming to the worst part of this session. As I just stepped back for a second to set up a new camera angle, when I turned back, I saw my tripod blown by the wind. It luckily didn't ruin the painting. These incidents remind me how vulnerable and temporary these moments are. As much as I enjoyed painting on this cold morning, the wind was constantly challenged me. The weather started to warm up, but it was still hard to keep my hands warm while painting. I kept one hand in my pocket to stay warm, even though it was about 4 degrees Celsius. Every now and then I had to stop and warm up both hands. Once there is a base or a ground layer established, I'm switching to palette knife to add details on top of that. This technique is called impasto and it basically means thicker paint application. At this point I really missed the leading line on the ground, so I've continued with that area. Painting the water reflections was one of the most joyful challenges. The water was reflecting of what was above it, acting like a mirror. Darker colors were fading, and the brightest highlights were visible. Achieving this effect lies in the simplicity, capturing a movement with only a few brush marks. The water level was rising, and the next day the place was underwater. The morning haze created an interesting separation between the trees. As we are translating a 3D space onto a two-dimensional surface, we should use every opportunity to describe the forms and shapes. We can use, of course, light and shadow, but also haze and atmosphere. Sometimes it can feel mystical, but if it's subtle, it can convey a peaceful, serene feeling. I constantly step back to see the bigger forms from a distance, working with the whole area. I focused more on the center branches and the depth created by the tree groups. The hero element of my scene is the huge white poplar tree, creating an interesting contrast between the dark and light branches. The bushes created visual noise, but I wanted to capture their form while maintaining the sunlight. On the left side, they made a thick mass, receiving direct morning sunlight, made a big bright area in the frame. I found it fascinating trying to capture millions of branches, simplifying and slowing down to grasp the essence of the scene. Every now and then you could see I add a little blue to the big mass of the trees. These are called sky holes, allowing you to see through the trees. They help a lot with feeling the depth and to sense layers of the forest. Usually the sky is darker on the top, and as we get closer to the horizon, it is usually getting lighter, creating a nice gradient. I looked at the subject and tried to move the paint in a way that conveyed the transparency and the dense forest with trees, bushes and the morning haze. When you are painting outside, your biggest enemy is time. From the moment I arrived and set up my easel, the sun had already changed. With every minute passed, I was juggling with mixing the colors, capturing the essence of the scene and trying to find the most important features with the fewest strokes possible. I alternated between painting the trees and the foreground, focusing on the ground area. I've moved back to the foreground area to enhance the water, adding the major forms and then playing with the ripples to add more of a water effect. The paint got too thick, making it hard to control. time was running, so I had to be quick and choose where I wanted to focus my time. What I truly appreciate about oil painting is the flexibility to revise and refine areas you are not satisfied with. I prefer to approach my overall workflow with an intuitive and progressive technique, knowing that nothing is permanent. The original morning separation was lost, which was why I should come early and get prepared as soon as possible. As the time passed and the scene changed, it was time to step back. The rising sun marked an end to this session, but not to the exploration. Lately I've come to the realization that a painting is never really complete. It just enjoys a period of rest. It calls for a pause. I've heard it somewhere, a good painting is never finished. It has many points where we can call it done. The role of the artist is to decide when to stop. This composition can be portrayed in many ways. It offers endless opportunities. As I look around, I'm certain I will return to this spot for a fresh perspective, and I'm sure I will have a totally different outcome. And this is the point when I decided to stop. We are not done yet when we decide to put down the paintbrush. Out in nature, I like to simply clean my tools for transportation so they don't color everything together. Wiping the excess paint with a paper towel is more than enough for me. I like to make sure to close my palette box nicely. As I mentioned before, this box closes almost airtight. This way I can be sure it will not leak into my bag, although it is better to move it with care to not mix the colors accidentally on the way. With their ends aligned, I'm simply rolling the brushes in a cloth. This way they can't really move and they are not touching each other. With all the challenges, now the last one is to safely bring back the wet painting to the studio. As you can see, the wind started to get stronger, so I'm extra cautious. The last thing I would want is to end my session with a fresh painting in the sand. I've built this wet painting carrier box from cardboard. It is made exactly 40 by 40 centimeters and I've glued little separators on the inside so the fresh paintings can touch each other. The panels fit perfectly inside and I can carry up to 8 paintings without damage. The projector mount is simply screwed with a standard attachment, so I can simply unscrew it. I packed everything up and transported it back to the car. Thank you for joining me in this painting session. I hope you found it inspiring. In a world where social media can often feel crowded, fast and loud, it's refreshing to disconnect. I have some exciting plans for the future, and I want to make sure you are the first to know about them. If you subscribe to my email news through my website, you will receive updates directly from me. Thank you for your support. Until next time, keep creating and keep exploring. Take care.